What's up, Flannelverse? It is time for Sunday Night Football in a blizzard. We're going to Buffalo 49ers at Buffalo for this one. Should be an interesting game. I don't want to call it a fun game necessarily. Could be a really slow paced game. But I'm looking forward to it. It's Sunday Night Football, something new, always exciting, regardless. We're, of course, as usual, going to go position by position, starting with quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. At the end, before I go to questions and lineups, I will take a look at FanDuel also. And then we will play around with some lineups. I'll take any remaining questions that you have. Feel free to ask questions throughout. I will try to get to them. All right. What else? While you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already done so. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. We're getting pretty close here. I got to update my banner here. Last I looked, we're at 3,849. So got a little over 1,150 left. So would appreciate it if you would subscribe. Of course, I've turned on subscriber only mode. Did Barkley really just score a touchdown? Oh my God, that's so frustrating for me. I've turned on subscriber only chat because the bots have been too obnoxious. But let's get into it. Let's start with quarterbacks. By the way, let me know if we get anything from Dallas Goedert and or Mike Evans. That would be helpful for me and my eliminator teams that I'm really tracking closely. Of course, my big stand in DFS this week was Jalen Hurts stacks. So like worst case scenario for me by far is Saquon Barkley touchdowns. And of course they're inevitable also. So I understand that they are inevitable, but was not hoping for that. All right, we're going to get into it. Of course, we know the quarterbacks here. Josh Allen, Brock Purdy back for this one, which is exciting. Actually, sorry, before we get into it, let me check if there are any unexpected inactives. I know that we got the Keon Coleman is inactive for this one, which makes it a little bit cleaner, at least for the Bills. It was going to be kind of messy if he did play, because we have not had a single game yet with all of the Bills receivers active since they got Amari Cooper. Kincaid out, as we knew. Keon Coleman out. Doesn't look like we have any surprises on the Bills side. Let me just check 49ers. Typo. Let's see. Brandon Allen is the third quarterback. No offensive players. Trent Williams out, which we knew. Nick Bosa out. Nothing unexpected from either of these teams. All right, let's get into it with the quarterbacks. Starting at captain, and we'll start with Josh Allen, who is just a great play. Like, what can you say about Josh Allen? Like, he's probably the best play on the slate objectively. He's only getting 16% ownership at captain. I think he should probably be getting more than 16% ownership at captain. I think I'm setting my captain cap at 20%, but if you wanted to raise your cap and play Josh Allen in 30% of your lineups, I don't really see any issue with that. I think that he's just a great play. He can do it on the ground. He hasn't really done it that much on the ground this year. Only 5 rushing touchdowns, like less than 30 yards per game on the ground this year. But I am still treating him like he is vintage Josh Allen, the Josh Allen we know and love, who absolutely can go off on the ground or through the air, and maybe a little bit more likely to in a blizzard. I don't know. It would make sense if he's a little more likely to. What's up, Brandon? Love to see it, fellow Minnesotans in chat. 16%. I'm probably gonna have more than that of Josh Allen. It's gonna be crazy high on FanDuel. It should be crazy high on FanDuel. Really can't argue with it. Yeah, I'll probably be over the field on Josh Allen. Is my takeaway looking at these numbers. 49.5% in the flex, 16% in captain. Both of those seem a little bit light to me. I'm gonna have all the Josh Allen. He's not gonna be in all my lineups, but I'll probably have 75-80% Josh Allen in my lineups. He's just an objectively great play. As far as stacking goes, because he can run as well as he does, and also because he spreads the ball around so much, he doesn't necessarily bring receivers with him. Thank you, Andres, for the update. Evans 15-yard catch. Let's go. Because he spreads the ball around so much, I would say you don't need to stack him even in the captain spot. Probably better to stack him. Like when I have him in the captain spot, I'm debating whether to set a rule to require one pass catcher when I have Josh Allen in the captain spot. I probably will set that rule, but I'm not totally sold on it, especially because of this snow game. I think it's a little bit more likely that he just does more on the ground, doesn't try to throw it in a blizzard. So and actually, let me reread read the actual weather report from Kevin Roth, which we can find here in Lineup HQ at Rotogrinders. Kevin says, after dealing with heavy snow most of the day Saturday, the main snow band is pushing south of Orchard Park early this morning. That should give volunteers plenty of time to have Highmark Stadium in good shape by Sunday Night Football. There's still chances for snow showers, but as I've been saying all week, the prospect of Snowmageddon here is highly unlikely. Okay, so maybe not Snowmageddon. And there's a chance they avoid snow altogether during game hours. The more noteworthy weather here is the wind, which should be coming in around 10 miles per hour sustained, but could mix in some healthy gusts, occasionally reaching 20 to 25 miles per hour. Combine the somewhat breezy conditions with temperatures in the upper 20s, and I do think we'll see some minor impact here to scoring, but I would not call it a high impact weather game. Okay, so it's not as bad as the pictures I've looked at. Everything that I've seen has been pretty bad here. But what do we have? The total. Okay, it's not showing the. Oh, here it is. The Niners have a 19-point implied team total. The Bills 25.5. So not super low scoring. But maybe Josh Allen runs it a little bit more if there is a little bit of wind there. Bucky Irving smashing. I love that for best ball, but not so much for DFS. Actually, just cost me like a couple $100 that touchdown. But he's crushing as was kind of expected here. Brock Purdy, on the other hand, I would stack and will. Okay, 39% projected ownership in the flex for Brock Purdy. In the captain spot, 7%. I think Brock Purdy for me is going to be a little bit of a fade. I think 7% captain spot looks pretty good. So maybe I'll be, at the field or over the field with Brock Purdy at captain, just in case he has no issues in this game. But I think that I'm going to find other players that I like better than Brock Purdy, just because, this 19-point implied team total, was that implied? Probably 2 touchdowns is kind of the expectation for the Niners. Maybe one of them is just a rushing touchdown. If he throws for 2 touchdowns, you'll probably want Brock Purdy, but not necessarily. So I think it's going to be a light fade for me, because I think that he could struggle with the Bills' really, really good defense. I think he's still probably a little bit banged up, so maybe that impacts things a little bit. I sort of expect the Niners to just lean more on Christian McCaffrey. So I am probably going to be lightly fading Brock Purdy. Then again, I look at these numbers; they don't look that high, so I don't know how much I'll be fading him. But we'll talk about it more as we get into some of the other players. But my expectation is I will have a light fade on Brock Purdy. I think that he, you want to stack him regardless of where he is in the lineup. It's funny, his numbers on the season, rushing wise, don't actually look all that different from Josh Allen. Here, I should pull up my notes here. But it's like they're both kind of mid-20s in terms of rushing yards per game. Purdy also has, I think, like 4 rushing touchdowns to Josh Allen's 5, and he's played fewer games than Josh Allen. So really the rushing numbers are not all that different on the season, but I'm still treating them a little bit differently because Josh Allen has such a long history of being an elite rushing quarterback. Josh Allen on the year, 28.7 rushing yards per game, 11 rushing touchdowns. Sorry, five rushing touchdowns in 11 games. Brock Purdy on the season, 26.7 rushing yards per game, so just 2 rushing yards fewer than Josh Allen per game. And he does have 4 rushing touchdowns in 10 games. So slightly worse, but he also, excuse me, does not have the long history that Josh Allen does of being an elite rusher. So I'm not treating him like he is an elite rusher. So I'm always stacking Brock Purdy. If I have him in the captain spot, I would like him to be at least double stacked. And you can definitely include Christian McCaffrey in those stacks. Like Christian McCaffrey is as much of a pass catcher as anybody on the team. So yeah, I'll probably be a light fade, but I'll still have a good amount of Brock Purdy, just maybe less than 46%. Captain spot, he looks a little bit light at 7%. Anyway, I think that is going to do it. I guess I can show you. And by the way, you can look at this. This is free. Schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed. You just go to research and reports at fantasy.com, fantasypoints.com, go to research and reports. It's on the bottom left. You can find the schedule adjusted points allowed page. And I'll just read off what I wrote in my article at Fantasy Points. As far as the defenses go here, the 49ers defense has allowed the 4th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the past 5 weeks. So really tough matchup. Of course, Nick Bosa out for this one. He's missed at least 1 or 2 games. I didn't look at how many games he's missed, but makes it a little bit easier for the Bills with Nick Bosa out there, not out there, I guess, on the field. So that helps a bit, but still, they have allowed the 4th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the past 5 weeks. It is not a great matchup for the Bills. The Bills defense has allowed the 6th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the past 5 weeks. So also a really tough matchup for Brock Purdy and the Niners. Also, who knows? Who knows how good the Niners will be going and playing in the cold in Buffalo. Might be tough for them. Didn't really seem to affect things with the Dolphins on Thanksgiving. So, maybe that gets overblown a little bit, these weather conditions for warm weather teams. But, something to worth mentioning at least, I think. Crunching, clicking sound. Is that my mouse? Can you hear it? I don't know what happens. Sometimes people can hear my mouse, other times not. It's probably a setting on my microphone. So apologies if that is annoying, but almost certainly that is my mouse. I'll move this over here. See if that's any better. Can you still hear me just fine with the microphone over here? Maybe it's a little bit further from my mouse. Anyway, I'll keep going. Okay. Dan says he doesn't hear anything. So maybe it is just you, Devin. You're hearing voices, maybe. Okay. We'll move on from quarterbacks, move on to running backs. And Chris McCaffrey, of course, an elite option always. McCaffrey getting 20% ownership in the captain spot. I'll probably get to 20%. That's going to be my cap, and I think I'll probably get there with McCaffrey. 44% in the flex. I think he's my favorite play on the Niners. So I'll probably eat the ownership, 64% going to McCaffrey. I just think regardless of how the game goes, he is so game script independent. He can do it. Like if they just decide to run the ball over and over again, obviously that benefits McCaffrey. But even if they do, just like they get behind, they need to throw it quite a bit. McCaffrey benefits from that also. Like he's involved regardless of how things go. So I love McCaffrey here. I am going to be play. Okay, it says didn't back up a voice chat with my brother. That's really funny, Devin. Good. I'm glad that it wasn't me because that has been an issue in the past with my my mic being too close to my mouse. Okay. McCaffrey looks great. I'm going to have a lot of McCaffrey. I don't really think I need to sell you on playing Christian McCaffrey. The ownership is there. The ownership is warranted. I'll just read off his stats in 3 games so far this season. He just got back 3 games ago. 43 carries, 16 targets, so more than 5 targets per game on 69.7% route participation. Just goes to show you how game script independent he is, that he's running 70% of the routes. A lot of running backs will run like 30% is probably, I don't know what the average is, like 30% or so. So 70% is massive. Just shows you how great of a spot or great of a role Christian McCaffrey has. Bills defense has allowed the 8th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs over the past 5 weeks. So also a little bit of a run funnel defense by that metric. So you can see last 5 weeks, sort by this, and it's top 8 matchup for McCaffrey, and it's mostly through the air, as you can see here. It's been a slight negative matchup for running backs on the ground, but they allow a lot of fantasy points through the air, so that looks good. And then as far as any other running backs for the Niners, here I'll pull up just running backs here. I mean, nobody I would click enthusiastically. Like none of them have much standalone value. Kyle Juszczyk, Jordan Mason, Isaac Orendo. I'll just show you, I guess, the game log for the Niners in recent weeks. Week 12, Isaac Orendo played 0 snaps. Kyle Juszczyk played 19 snaps, had 0 carries, 1 target on 25% route participation. That's kind of what you expect from Kyle Juszczyk. Jordan Mason played 9 snaps in that game at Green Bay, had 3 carries, 2 targets. I guess what is Jordan Mason's price tag? $2,400. He would be the one that I would be most inclined to go to, just because he has the contingent value. Like they're not going to make Kyle Juszczyk the featured back if something happened to McCaffrey. I don't think Isaac Orendo is as good as Jordan Mason. Like we saw what happened when McCaffrey went down previously. So I do think that Jordan Mason is actually pretty playable at $2,400. But that's going to depend on ownership too. And we have Juszczyk coming in about 3.5% ownership. He could spike a 4 target game and one of them being in the end zone. So he's not like the worst $2,000 play, to be clear. I think 3.5% ownership, I'm fine with that. I might get to a little bit of Juszczyk, but I don't want to be much over the field at 3.5%. Like if the opto gives me 5%, I'm not going to cut it back. But if the opto gives me 0%, I'll probably try to get to 2 or 3%. He's certainly not a priority for me. Jordan Mason, where is Jordan Mason? I'm not seeing him here. Am I just blind? Oh, here he is. 6.5% ownership going to Jordan Mason, 2,400. I think that looks pretty good. Not like, a smash play where I'm like, he has a great standalone value and the contingent upside. It is mostly just contingent upside for Jordan Mason. But he has, obviously elite contingent upside here. So 6.5% ownership. I probably do end up over that number on Jordan Mason just because the upside is so high. If something happened to McCaffrey or there's a blowout and he comes in the fourth quarter or something like that, I think that is less likely because the Niners really need to win this game. So I think the contingent upside due to a blowout is not worth a ton. It's not going to take much. Devin says, sorry, Neil, McCaffrey looks hurt, not himself. That's Andre says McCaffrey looks hurt, not himself. I agree with you. But I also think he just has such a great role that I don't know. It's tough to get away from it, but that does make it a little bit more likely that that Jordan Mason has that contingent upside due to injury. If McCaffrey is already a little bit limited and then something happens to him in game, like he's really going to try to play as much as he can, as long as he can. But if he can't, then that obviously would benefit Jordan Mason. ABC XYZ says Jordan Mason ain't touching my lineups. I mean, that's if you're not playing 150, like I probably wouldn't play a ton of Jordan Mason either. I don't know. He probably wouldn't make my lineups in a 20 lineup set. He's more just like in a 150 set. I probably try to get over 6.5% when you have, more room to play for those contingent scenarios. Yeah, I think that does it for the 49ers running back breakdown. Just nobody really has standalone value outside of Christian McCaffrey. Jordan Mason, as we see here, he has a little bit. If we just look at the game log since McCaffrey came back, it is 2 targets in the past 3 games, 6 total carries in those games. So I don't know, not worth a ton. Okay. On the other side, we have James Cook, 9,600. Projects pretty well. I do have interest in James Cook. He's getting 33% ownership in the flex, in the captain spot, 8% ownership. I probably come in overweight on James Cook. Again, we don't have many players on the Bills that I think have really solidified great roles, like of the receivers. So I think James Cook looks really good. One of the better captain options at sub 8% projected ownership. Not a bad matchup for James Cook against the Niners, if I'm remembering correctly. And I guess I'll read that off. I want to double check myself here. Maybe it's not as good as I'm thinking. Let's see. Yeah, 49ers defense has allowed the 11th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs over the past 5 weeks. So not a great matchup for James Cook, but also not the worst. Kind of a middling matchup, as you see here. It's bad for running backs through the air. Not bad. A little bit of a positive matchup for running backs on the ground. Ultimately, I think James Cook looks great. One of the more projectable plays here. Also, if it is windy, if we do get Snowmageddon at all, suddenly he's going to look awesome. So yeah, I like me some James Cook. I plan to be overweight on James Cook. I'm playing this game largely through the running games. As you could guess, I'm playing Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, James Cook. I think all of them look great. No, I'm thinking the opposite, by the way. I'm thinking Buffalo is more likely to blow out the 49ers, to be clear. But the 49ers need this game, so they're going to be playing all out for the entire game. Maybe they're able to keep it close. Could be a fun one here. Outside of James Cook, we have Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. Really kind of hard to prioritize either of them. I think both are fine plays at low enough ownership. I guess I'll read off my notes on the roles for Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. You can kind of see them here, but I'll just read off what I wrote. And then we can take a look at the ownership. Ray Davis, over the past 5 games, has 23 carries and 3 targets on 13.1% route participation. So less than 1 target per game, a little bit more than 4 carries per game. He also would probably benefit if it is a blowout. Ray Davis would come in for the Bills. So I think he has strong contingent upside, some standalone value, looks fine. And then Ty Johnson in over the past 5 games has 8 carries, so just under 2 carries per game and 6 targets, so just over 1 target per game on 30.2% route participation. He's 3,000. I guess we can look at the ownership here. Ty Johnson coming in at just under 13% projected ownership. Ray Davis coming in at 19% projected ownership. So to me, because of the ownership difference, I probably have a preference for Ty Johnson. Ray Davis probably has the more contingent upside. He also he's made some nice plays through the air, so he is capable of it, even though his targets are limited. I think Ray Davis is a fine play, but 19% probably a bit much for Ray Davis, I think. Whereas Ty Johnson down at 13%, I like that a little bit better. So my preference, if I were just playing one of them, is Ty Johnson. But I don't know. Ray Davis has shown some juice. He looks pretty good out there. I understand the ownership, but he doesn't have a ton of standalone value. As noted, it's like 4 carries and maybe a target per game is what you kind of expect there. But totally fine if you want to get to some Ray Davis. I think I'll be light on 19%, I guess, is where my takeaway. All right. Yeah, for sure. Jordan Mason could get a sneaky touchdown. I'm with you there. Could happen. Yeah, the bots are apparently subbing now. They did this the last time, so it took them a couple of streams where I turned on subscriber only, and but now they're here. They've figured out how to subscribe to the channel to get in here. All right. I think that does it for the running backs. Maybe I didn't read off the matchup stuff for Buffalo. I can't remember if I did, but I will read it off again just in case. So it looks like it is a below average. I think it did. It's the 11th worst matchup for running backs, but not that terrible for running backs specifically on the ground. Okay, I'm going to move on to wide receivers. All right. And by the way, if any of you are looking to play some flash drafts during the game, I wrote out a little strategy piece. It is in my Discord. There's a channel in my Discord called DraftKings Flash Drafts. So check out in the description of this video if you want to join the Flannelverse Discord. A lot of good conversation happening there. And one of them, if you're interested at all in flash drafts, which I love, I find them to be very profitable. Not every night, but over the course of a month, most months can be profitable there. Would recommend signing up for join the Discord. It's free, and then you can check out my strategy there. All right. Wide receiver talk. I guess we'll start here. And there are every link you find in my Discord, there are major discounts going on right now. Fantasy Points is very reduced prices for Cyber Monday deals, whatever. 4 for 4 is like $5 for the rest of the year. That includes my main slate breakdowns for both cash game and tournaments, and other stuff there as well. So worth the price, I would say. And of course, Roto Grinders has some discounts. I don't even know what the Roto Grinders discounts are, but you can check those out at the Roto Grinders pages. If you use promo code Flannel, you should get some additional discount there. All right. Khalil Shakir has the best projection of all the wide receivers on the slate. He's 8,000, projecting for 15.4 fantasy points here. I guess I'll look on Roto Grinders also, projecting for 15.3 at Roto Grinders. So pretty similar both places. Projecting for 38% ownership in the flex. At captain, Khalil Shakir projecting for 13% ownership. So a little bit over 50% total ownership on Khalil Shakir. I imagine I'm going to come in a little bit light on that number, because there are other receivers that I'm going to be taking some shots on. As I said, I'm going to be overweight on the running games. So ultimately, I probably do come in a little bit light on Khalil Shakir. It's also not the best matchup for Shakir if you look at schedule adjusted points allowed. First, we'll look at wide receivers in general for the Bills. It is a bottom 3 matchup for wide receivers in general facing the Niners, but then it's specifically a bad matchup for slot receivers. The worst matchup for slot receivers by far, -9 points. relative to schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. So they're allowing 9 fewer fantasy points to slot receivers, if I'm understanding this number correctly. 9 fewer than you would expect for like the level of slot receivers they faced. Slot receivers just have not done well against the Niners at all. And Khalil Shakir has run like 70% of his routes have been in the slot in games with Amari Cooper. So in those 3 games with Amari Cooper, 70% of Khalil Shakir's routes have been in the slot, and that is the toughest spot for wide receivers against the Niners. So, factoring that all in, I think that it's going to be a light fade for me on Khalil Shakir. Now, he's been great all year, so I'm not sure that it really matters. And if you look at, actually, let me pull up a different page here. I'm going to pull up let's go to the, maybe I do want the data suite. I'm thinking about where I want to go. Yeah, maybe I will go to the data suite because they have a couple different interesting pages here. Let me pull this so I don't have to sign back in. If you copy paste, if people who play around with the data suite probably know this, if you copy paste a data suite link into a new tab, you don't have to sign back in. But if you go into the data suite new every time, they do make you sign back in. All right, let's go to wide receiver coverage matchup. Let's take a look at this quickly for the Bills. Because I think it still shows up as a positive. Yeah, expected fantasy points per route. Like he still has the best expected fantasy points per route, clearly, despite this doesn't show him as that negative of a coverage grade, which is, it's a different thing. The coverage grade versus the schedule adjusted matchup. So like the way the 49ers play defense, I don't know if it's they play man, they play zone. I haven't looked specifically at that kind of stuff, but that's a different thing than the schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to certain positions where people line up. So by this, it's a slightly negative matchup. It's actually worse. I mean, Keenan Coleman is out for this game, so that's not really applicable. But worth noting that it's only a slightly negative coverage grade, but then also they just don't allow fantasy points to slot receivers. So all things considered, I think I'm going to be a bit light on Keenan Coleman. I don't want to oversell it like he's in the worst possible spot and he's a hard fade, but at 50% total ownership, I probably come in more like 40% on Khalil Shakir total ownership. Not taking like a major stand here, but because I like some other players better, I think I end up light on Khalil Shakir overall. Probably light in the captain spot, but more so light in the flex where he's coming in at 38% ownership. Ultimately, it's going to be a bit of a fade for me. Not UM says Niners slot cornerback is out, by the way. That's a good note. So maybe that's a little bit, maybe it's not as bad as it looks on paper, I guess. It's still like that's one quarterback. Yeah, Keenan Coleman is out. As noted. Any word on the field status? Real mess earlier. Yeah, we went over that a little bit earlier. Looks like it, they've had time to clear it out. There might not be snow during the game is Kevin Ross' note. So that's all I've got for you as far as the field conditions. There's a chance that we won't see any snow during the game. They've had time to clear it out. So after Khalil Shakir, moving on, we'll do Buffalo first and then San Francisco. Amari Cooper, 7,200, coming in the flex, 23% ownership, in the captain spot, 3.5% ownership. So when I refer to other wide receivers that I like better that I'm going to target, I'm mostly referring to Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper is going to be a stand for me. And this is one, you can follow my logic and then see if you agree with me, because it's mostly a like leaning into the chaos kind of a thing, or not necessarily chaos, but like leaning into the unknown with Amari Cooper. And I think the unknown is intriguing for me with Amari Cooper, given how little ownership he's getting. Let's see, and I think I have this. Yes, I do. Okay, good. So he's only played 3 games since he came to Buffalo in week 7, just his first game. He hadn't even been there a week. He was like, they were telling him how to run the plays as he was going. Only ran 34% of the routes in that game, saw 5 targets. In week 8, gets up to 62% route participation, only saw 2 targets in that game, but promising to see that the route participation nearly doubled in week 8. I don't remember if this is an in-game injury or if it came after the game, but regardless, We saw a big jump in route participation in week 8, and then he was out in weeks 9 and 10. So he misses a couple games, and then he comes back, and it's like he's resetting, recovering from injury, maybe still limited. So in week 11, he comes back down to 49% route participation, 3 targets. We haven't really seen him in a full-time role yet. So I'm sort of hopeful. Now they have the week 12 bye. So he's had 2 weeks since he, came back from injury, played a part-time role. I'm kind of hoping, I'm very much hoping that he comes back and is ready for a full-time role with 2 weeks since the last game. So I think that we could see Amari Cooper in a much better role than we've seen him in so far. And he's cheap, and I think he's probably their best receiver. Maybe you disagree. Maybe Khalil Shakir can compete with him for that. But Amari Cooper is a star receiver in the NFL, now in a great offense. I think that he could be a full-time player, and he's not being like the ownership is not coming in like he is a full-time player, like he is acclimated to this offense. So I'm going to lean into the unknown a little bit with Amari Cooper. You can decide for yourself whether you want to tail me on that, but that's going to be probably one of my bigger stands on the slate is the field's only playing 26% Amari Cooper. I might have 50% Amari Cooper. It's risky. Like there's definitely risk there. Again, you just look at what he's actually done with the team so far. He's maxed out at 62% route participation. Maybe he wasn't limited in week 11, and maybe that's just kind of the role they have for him. But just given how talented he is, I'm willing to risk it. I'm going to play a lot of Amari Cooper. Yeah, he hurt his wrist in the game. You're saying not EOM. I remember him having the cast on there, but I just didn't remember if that was during the game or if it was post that game. Either way, I think now he's had a couple more weeks to recover. He was in 49% route participation for that last game, so I think that he should be good to go. Samuel or Mac Hollins? That's a good question. For me, it would be Curtis Samuel probably, but let's dig in a little bit on Curtis Samuel and Mac Hollins. Take a look at the ownership. So in the flex, we have Curtis Samuel coming in at 18.5% projected ownership. Mac Hollins coming in at 13% projected ownership. Curtis Samuel is 4,400. Mac Hollins 3,600. So both of them getting a bit of ownership. Samuel is getting more ownership. It's sort of tough still to read the wide receiver situation, like what they actually want to do with these guys. But I'll read off my notes again on the wide receivers. So in week 11, we had that game with Amari Cooper, as I said, played nearly 50% of the routes in week 11. Curtis Samuel that week saw 6 targets on 64.4% route participation. That's the most recent game for the Bills. 6 targets, 64.4% route participation. It's possible that he loses some of that role with Amari Cooper coming back, but I think that he is pretty likely to hang on to it. And then Mac Hollins in 3 games with Amari Cooper, so they've been active together for 3 games. Mac Hollins has played, run 47.9% of the routes, has seen just 3 targets, so 1 target per game in games with Amari Cooper, running fewer than 50% of the routes. I think Mac Hollins is a little bit more likely to lose more of his role. Sort of just guessing there, like don't have any great read on the situation, but it seems like Curtis Samuel sort of has more of a carved out role for himself. Of course, Mac Hollins has been like all season. We can just look at his game log here. Pretty strong route participation. Had 1 game where he dropped down to 38%, but like he's been over 50% route participation for most of the year. It was down to, so in week 10 we had Amari Cooper out. It was down to 51% in week 11. I think he probably loses out with Amari Cooper coming back more so than Curtis Samuel. And then you can see here 51% in the last game. Curtis Samuel was at, I just read it off, but he was at 64.5% and saw 6 targets. So I think he is a bigger part of the game plan. He's getting a little bit more ownership, but it's not enough for me to prefer Mac Hollins. I don't really see it likely that Mac Hollins gets 5 targets in a game, and I think it's like not unlikely for Curtis Samuel to get there. So yeah, for me it would be Curtis Samuel at 18-19%. Then I prefer that over Mac Hollins. But Hollins I think is still in play at 13% ownership. I think he's a fine play. I might even get overweight to that. I don't know that I will. I'm not gonna necessarily force that. But I think just Curtis Samuel looks strong. I think that I plan to be overweight to the field on Curtis Samuel. My guess is I come in right around the field on Mac Hollins. Is that all of the Buffalo receivers? We did Shakir, Cooper, Samuel, Hollins. Yeah, that's all of the Buffalo receivers that I plan to play. Again, Keon Coleman is inactive for this game, so you don't have to worry about Keon Coleman coming back. On the other side, we have Jauan Jennings has seemingly supplanted Deebo Samuel as the top receiver for the Niners. He's only 7,400. Deebo is 9,000. We also have Ricky Pearsall and Chris Conley there for the Niners. Start at the top. Jauan Jennings getting only 29% projected ownership in the flex. That's pretty interesting. And then in the captain spot, Jauan Jennings, 5.5% ownership. I probably come in overweight on Jauan Jennings. His role has been really strong. And I guess I can read off my notes here again on Jauan Jennings. So in his last two games with Brock Purdy. So in the last game, it dipped a little bit, but that was with Brandon Allen at quarterback. In his last two games with Brock Purdy, Jauan Jennings has 21 targets on 88.3% route participation. So just a great role in recent weeks for Jauan Jennings. Not a great matchup. The Bills defense has allowed the 12th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the past 5 weeks, but really, really strong role for Jauan Jennings, and he's not expensive, and he's not getting a ton of ownership. So I'm probably leaning in and playing a good amount of Jauan Jennings. I'd anticipate being overweight to the field there. Deebo Samuel on the season, 55 targets on 74% route participation. I think that he is injured in some way. I think he's just not a full go at this point. Just the role, 5.5 targets per game, loses the rushing stuff with Christian McCaffrey back, or most of it. So he's a little bit of a tough sell at 9,000, getting 5.5% cap ownership. So I would just rather play more Jauan Jennings if they're going to get the same amount of ownership. Jennings cheaper and a better role. I mean, I never want to like completely overlook Deebo Samuel, to be clear. Just any game, he'll go stretches where he doesn't really do anything, and then one game pop off for 2 or 3 touchdowns, and it's just like, okay, fine. I guess I decided to use Deebo Samuel for this game, but 28% flex ownership, I probably come in light on that. Yeah, I think Deebo looks fine, but just I'm going to lean more into Jauan Jennings because he's cheaper and getting the same ownership and has a better role. So all things considered, I'm probably going to be overweight to Jauan Jennings, maybe slightly underweight to Deebo Samuel. Is how I anticipate that shaking out. And then Ricky Pearsall, pretty interesting. 13% ownership. He's 4,800. He has been, just look, I'll pull up his game log here. Really underwhelming. In week 12, 66% route participation, 0 targets. Week 11, 57% route participation, 1 target. Week 10, it looked like, okay, maybe Ricky Pearsall is going to be a thing. He's going to break out because he had 67% route participation and 6 targets in that game. So I guess just the past 2 games in particular have been really disappointing after starts. He starts off in week 7, first 3 games, 5 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets. And then for some reason, and I guess one of these games was with Brandon Allen, but he just has not done anything the past couple of weeks. With all that said, I'm going to be overweight on Ricky Pearsall. Just 13% feels pretty good to me on Ricky Pearsall when he is running 65% of the routes, gets his starting quarterback back. I do think that he's a talented rookie, so I anticipate I will be overweight to Ricky Pearsall. I think he looks like a really strong play as far as contrarian plays go. I think he's one of the better options who are just not getting much ownership, and he'll be out on the field plenty. I think he's got the talent. So yeah, ultimately I'm going to be overweight to the projected ownership on Ricky Pearsall, which again is really, really minimal here. 13% in the flex. In the captain spot, Pearsall coming in at sub 1%. I think he's even like viable, not a priority, but I'll probably have a couple of shares of Captain Ricky Pearsall, but mostly like him in the flex where he's 4,800. He'll be out on the field, so you can at least dream the whole game. What if they throw it to Ricky Pearsall? So he's it'd be fun to watch the game if you have Ricky Pearsall in your lineup, and I think that he has talent. So I am going to take some shots on Pearsall. Not UM says of Deebo Samuel, what's wrong with him is he's fat and over 8 like Deebo. Over 8. I don't get it. I'm missing something. All right, let's move on. Samuel and the captain, are you talking about Deebo or Curtis? Both or do you want to see the ownership? Deebo, I'll look at both. in the captain, Deebo coming in at 5.5% ownership. I mean, I think he's a fine captain play. Like, again, he has those games where he'll score a couple touchdowns. They just give him a lot more usage out of nowhere. So if you want to go there, sure. He's a very talented player. Not a priority for me at captain. But you can go there. And then Curtis Samuel, if you were talking about Curtis, 1.5% ownership. He's cheap enough that I think like you could play him and allow you to get up to Josh Allen and Chris McCaffrey and Jauan Jennings and have a really good lineup. Okay, yeah, Curtis. Yeah, you want to know Curtis? Yeah, 1.6% projected ownership on Curtis Samuel. I think that seems totally fine because of what it allows you to do with the rest of your lineup. And then Chris Conley, I honestly have not even looked really at Chris Conley. He just doesn't have much of a role here. Yeah, one route run in each of the past 2 weeks, one target last game. Very much like pray for a touchdown. Otherwise, you don't really want him in your lineup. He also is not free, I don't believe. Yeah, 1.2K, 2% ownership. That's fair. You want to play some Chris Conley in 2% of your lineups. I think that is viable, but not a priority for me by any means. Jacob Cowing, similarly, like he's not getting any ownership. I guess he's active, so theoretically could be out there, but not a priority for me either. I think we can move on to tight end. So in summary, again, my biggest priority, I think my biggest stand on the slate probably is going to be Amari Cooper. And we don't have a lot that I'm super excited about, but it's just I'm willing to bet on the unknown there with Amari Cooper, bet on the talent, bet that he has a bigger role after the bye week, and he's too cheap for that role is kind of the thinking, the hope with Amari Cooper. But we have no real indication that is going to be the case. At tight end, we have George Kittle. He is 8,600. Nice projection there on Kittle. Projected for only 22% flex ownership on Kittle. That is pretty intriguing. I thought that was going to be higher than 22%. 3.5% cap and ownership. I was ready to make the case against George Kittle, and I guess I will. Here, let me get rid of this bot. I'll tell you what the case is, which is Trent Williams is out, which could just mean more Kittle blocking. Is my biggest concern with Kittle is I did have to put your bad typing on blast. My biggest concern with Kittle is that he's just going to be blocking a lot more, and he loves to block. He won't care if he has to block more, but I will care if I'm playing him. So the downside there is maybe he doesn't run quite as many routes with Trent Williams out. They need him more as a blocker. But if he's going to come in low owned, like it's a concern, but also like not a guarantee. He's also a very strong pass catcher and coming in at 25% total ownership. So I think Kittle looks great at 25% total ownership. That would be, I plan to be overweight to that number. Even with the concerns that he might be blocking a lot more with Trent Williams out of the game, might be called on more there. Ricardo, Jacob Cowing, just not really a priority for me. I guess let's take a look at his game log. I guess I did not even bother doing that. I also forget, does he return kicks? Somebody in chat let me know. Does Jacob Cowing return kicks? I know he's like a speedy rookie. It would make sense, but I don't actually know if he has that role. He one route run last week. Sorry, that's in week 10. Maybe he was inactive in week 11 and 12. He's not played since week 10. But one route run in week 10, 4 routes run in week 8. Just doesn't really have much of a role. This is, some of their receivers were out. So I don't think that I'm going to get to any Jacob Cowing, to be clear. I'm not even 100% certain that he's active. I'm assuming that he is because does he have a projection at Roto Grinders too? I think he has a projection both places. So I'm assuming he's active, and he's only 200. So I guess as far as like $200 players go, maybe he's as good a bet as anybody, but he's not a great bet. He's probably not going to see the field, run any routes. So not a priority for me by any means. I don't even know if I'll get to any in a 150 set. I think he's probably viable in a 150 set, but I'm not sure that I get there. Let me just check in on chat. Oh, he was inactive those 2 games, but he's not on the inactives list. He wasn't like on the practice squad and needed to be called up, did he? Oh, hell yeah. Mike Evans continuing to go. Let's go. Outside of George Kittle, Eric Saubert is 600. I don't think he doesn't have much of a role with Kittle active. Here, we can pull it up though. 8 routes last week, 1 target. Uh, 27 routes in week 11. I did not remember that from was Kittle out in week 11? He was. Kittle was out in that game. So that doesn't really count. But in games with George Kittle, he has a max of 2 targets in any game this season. And I believe Kittle has missed both of these games where he had strong route participation. And probably, I would guess he got hurt in the Vikings game. I'm trying to remember. I don't know. But regardless, Eric Sauber is just a backup tight end, hope for a touchdown. Otherwise, you're not going to want him in your lineup. I'm probably not going to get too much Eric Sauber because I think we have stronger options in Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, the running backs. I think that he's certainly not a priority for me. Maybe makes it in a 150 set, but not a priority at all. Okay. Nadia says, FYI, Trent Williams was out last week and Kittle wasn't pass blocking. They also weren't moving the ball at all last week. But yeah, it's a good note. Maybe it's not as big a concern. He just I don't know, doesn't run as many routes all the time as he would like. On the other side, we have again Dalton Kincaid is out. Dawson Knox is the starting tight end for the Bills. Oh, and I should before we do this, look at the schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed by these teams, and I will read off the numbers because I already wrote them down. Bills defense has allowed the 12th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to tight ends over the past 5 weeks. So not the best matchup for George Kittle. Slightly negative matchup there. 49ers defense has allowed the 5th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to tight ends over the past 5 weeks. So bad matchups for the tight ends. Worse for Dawson Knox. Not that big of a concern because he's not going to be that involved anyway. You're just kind of hoping for a handful of catches. Maybe one of them goes for a touchdown. Had a fine role last week with Dalton Kincaid was out last week. Dawson Knox, 75.6% route participation and saw 6 targets. So he actually had a pretty good role last week with Dalton Kincaid out. He's pretty cheap. I think that he's playable. Chino asks Knox at captain. I think he's viable. Let's take a look at the ownership numbers. So Knox at in the flex, 26% projected ownership. It's probably fine because he's 4,000. At captain, coming in at 6% ownership. I don't love that. I would probably be light on 6%. Dawson Knox at captain. He had some blow up weeks, like spike weeks, back when he was the starting tight end. So I guess maybe it's he could do it again where he scores a couple touchdowns, but it's fairly unlikely. I don't know, 6% is probably fine. That's probably, I think the ownership numbers, both of those ownership numbers to me strike me as okay, 6% at captain and 26%, so 32% total ownership to Dawson Knox. I suspect I'll come in a little bit light on Dawson Knox, but I don't have any major issue with those numbers. And then the other tight end for, where are we going? Quentin Morris with Dalton Kincaid out. I guess we can see exactly what he did last week. In week 11. So this is with Dalton Kincaid out, ran 8 routes, saw 1 target, very much a backup tight end where you're hoping for a touchdown. Not really. He has maxes out at 1 target in any game this season. So not a priority by any means, but I think Quentin Morris is playable in a 150 set. Again, if you just want to do a dart throw in a large field tournament, I guess even without a 150 set, if you just want to take a dart throw on a backup tight end, I think Quentin Morris is a fine play in that respect. I think that does it for the player portion of this. Yeah. Oh, I didn't move my my sidebar down to tight ends. I'll move on to defenses and kickers. Just take a look at the ownership numbers here. We have Tyler Bass coming in at 18% ownership, Bills coming in at 19% ownership, Jake Moody coming in at 13% ownership, and 49ers coming in at 19% ownership. That's interesting. Bills defense looks good to me. Really strong defense. Playing at home. Maybe the Niners don't acclimate that well. I think 90% seems fine to me. They're kind of expensive. Not a number that I'm going to be going on my way to be well overweight to the field on, but I think 19% feels about right. That's probably what I want to get to with the Bills defense. sounds like, win gusts, but not necessarily sustained wins. So I don't know that I'm downgrading the kickers too much. I think 18% to Tyler Bass again feels about fair. I think I'm willing to get there. Jake Moody, because he's only 13%, might be willing to get there. I'm more inclined generally to play the kicker of the team that I expect to win. So Jake Moody, I'm not expecting the Niners to win. So I kind of have concerns that maybe in the second half they're down by too much, they don't want to kick it anymore. But he could have 3 field goals in the first 2.5 quarters, and a couple of them 40 yards, and suddenly he looks really good. He's also 5,200. I don't know, 13% I think seems fine, not a priority. And then Niners defense, I kind of like that. 19% ownership is, again, I'm hoping for lighter, and I could see it coming in lighter, but because they're only 3,200, Josh Allen, has a history of being a little bit turnover prone. Ultimately, I kind of like it. I think that I'm going to have, I'm going to eat it. I'm probably going to have about 20% Niners defense, just right there with the field on the Niners defense. It's a high enough ownership number that I'm not like trying to get much higher, but I think that it's a fair number. All right, let's see. Already wants to know if anybody likes a Deebo bounce back game. Favorite captain, Josh Allen, I think. I do like Amari Cooper as like a contrarian captain, probably not for high stakes, but in large field stuff, I think like taking some shots on Amari Cooper is something I like to do. I like James Cook at captain also. So I think, I think those are my 3 favorites are Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, James Cook, and then my contrarian captain, like super contrarian, is Amari Cooper. Those are probably my 4 that I like the best. Let's see. Favorite captain, leaning Cook. Yeah, no, I like Cook at captain also. We can try to build a Cook captain lineup in a minute. How much will we leave? I've not even played around with it. I think I set it to leave like 800, but it's up to you how much you're willing to leave on the table. It's obviously the more you leave on the table, the more you're risking just losing every penny you put in. So it's risky, but I think I'm requiring like $800 left on the table on DraftKings, something like that. And Sandy wants to know Ty Johnson or Ray Davis. I broke the tie to Ty Johnson because he's projected for like 13% ownership to Ray Davis is 19, something like that. So I think they have similar like range of outcomes. I think Ray Davis has probably the highest of the high ceilings because I think he has more contingent upside if something happened to James Cook. But I think Ty Johnson probably more likely of the two of them to hit 10 fantasy points because of the receiving work, and if he just scores a touchdown, he's going to look pretty good. And he's coming in lower owned, so I think I break the tie to Ty Johnson there. But nothing really separates them all that much. All right, I'm going to take a look at FanDuel real quick, and then I'm going to play with lineups. Take any other questions you have. Start looking at the MVPs, and as you can see here, Josh Allen, 30% projected ownership at MVP on FanDuel. Actually, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I don't hate that. I think I would be willing to play Josh Allen, even in a single entry. I think he's a totally fine play at MVP. McCaffrey, 23%. Seems okay. Cook, 9%. Seems pretty good. I do think that this is a slate where, as much as I like Josh Allen MVP, you can go to some of the pretty contrarian options here. I think Deebo, Jauan Jennings, George Kittle, Amari Cooper, 1.5% looks really good to me. That's enticing. And even if you wanted to go to like a defense and just play for a really sloppy game, I think that is viable on FanDuel. I mean, it's viable on DraftKings too. I probably don't go as low as like Curtis Samuel or Ray Davis on FanDuel at MVP. But I think like the actual like star players getting 1%, 3% ownership, like I'm willing to do that on FanDuel, I think. In the flex, Purdy coming in, really Purdy's getting more ownership, I guess, because Allen's getting it in the captain spot. But Purdy coming in at 36% ownership. I think he looks better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings. I think Purdy very much playable. He's only 13.5, where Josh Allen is 16,000 on FanDuel. McCaffrey only getting 29% ownership looks really good to me. Cook 29% looks really good to me. Again, I don't know. Shakir only 11,000 on FanDuel. Getting 29% is probably fine. But again, Jauan Jennings looks good to me. Prefer Jennings cheaper, getting less ownership than Deebo on FanDuel. Also, I think I prefer Jennings of the two of them. Yeah, Knox 20% is okay. Again, Amari Cooper, just a high priority for me. Only 18% projected ownership in the flex. I'm just going to lean into the unknown there. Hope for a bigger role here. George Kittle, 17%, looks really good. 12,000 on FanDuel. Kickers and defenses, of course. Same old story. Ricky Pearsall coming in at sub 10% ownership on FanDuel. For a guy who's running routes on 2/3 of dropbacks, I think Pearsall is pretty intriguing at 8,000 on FanDuel. Just hope that he busts one out. Yeah, I think that is those are the standout plays for me. Curtis Samuel, 13%, looks pretty good at 7,500 also. Those are the things that stand out to me on FanDuel. We'll move this back to DraftKings and then play around some lineups. But before I do that, I'm just going to double check on any questions you have. Right, let's see, bots, get out of here. All right. I mean, yeah, Cooper should scare you. Like there's no guarantee that he has a bigger role than he had last week. Just for large field GPPs, it's something that I'm willing to take that risk. And I've even before I won any money at DFS, I'm very much not risk averse. Like I'm willing to take those shots for these large field GPPs, just even if it is not the likeliest scenario. I just enjoy taking big swings, and I think that it's a pretty good swing. And it's like the worst case scenario for Amari Cooper is probably 50% route participation, sees 3 targets in like regular game script. That's about the worst case scenario. And he's talented enough that I think he could potentially still pay off. But I think that he should have a bigger role here. Sure. If you want to play for the CMC blowout his ACL game, certainly play some Jordan Mason in those lineups. Juszczyk or Morris? Morris. Why am I blanking on who Morris is? Oh, Quentin Morris. Probably Juszczyk if you're going to one of them. Probably like slightly more likely to see 3 targets and score a touchdown. It's pretty close though. Like Quentin Morris, like probably has some contingent upside at least. Like if something were to happen to Dawson Knox, I would imagine Quentin Morris would have would be the full-time tight end in that case. So it's pretty close between those two. I think I have a slight preference for Juszczyk though. I think it's just a little bit more likely to get there in a regular game script. All right, I'm going to play around. Let's try an Amari Cooper lineup. Yeah, I went over it a little bit earlier, Ricardo, but I think Jordan Mason doesn't have much standalone value. I'm going to play. He's projected for around 7.5% ownership in the flex spot. I will probably be above weight to that. Again, don't think he has a ton of standalone value. I think that they're just going to lean all the way in on Christian McCaffrey, but he has awesome contingent value. Like we've seen it before with Christian McCaffrey out. I think that the contingent value is good enough that I am probably going to end up slightly overweight on 7. Like I probably want to get like 10% Jordan Mason, just in case something happens where there's an injury to McCaffrey or there is like a total blowout where the Niners, it's not even worth playing McCaffrey anymore. So I'll play a bit of Jordan Mason, probably maybe not even 10%, but like somewhere in that 7 to 10% range. Cheapest dart throw that I'm playing. I don't think I'm getting to any Garendo, just because I think that Jordan Mason has that the value. Let's see. Let me look at the cheapest dart throw. I probably get to a little bit of Quentin Morris, I would guess. Not a ton. Yeah, I don't think that I'm going to any of these 200 guys. Again, Cowing, if you want to go there. Yeah, no injured. Okay, so he was out with a concussion. Did not remember that. Yeah, you could consider Cowing. I'd say he's the cheapest that's like viable. But I think for me, probably the cheapest I go is maybe Sauber. What's Ronnie Bell's note? Oh, he's waived. Okay, I didn't even know. Okay. Yeah, probably Saubert. Possibly I don't even get down to Saubert and maybe it'd be Morris. Yeah, I think like there's a non-zero chance that the cheapest I get is Jordan Mason. I just cut it off there. I don't play any use check Morris, but I imagine I'll get to a little bit of Morris and a little bit of Saubert, talking like 1 to 2% of these guys, not in any kind of real number. But the cheapest that I'm like going to get more than 5% of, I think, is Jordan Mason. All right, I'm going to try. I'm going to make a lineup real quick here, and we'll try an Amari Cooper off the wall lineup. Amari Cooper in the captain spot because he's not getting much ownership there. I'm just going to go right away. I'm going to throw in Josh Allen and Christian McCaffrey. So I've got 3 of my favorites in there. Now we still have 58.66 left per player. I think I would like to go to. Do I want to go Dawson Knox, Curtis Samuel? Maybe Curtis Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, Jauan Jennings. That looks pretty good. Leaves 1,000 on the table. You've got Amari Cooper in the captain spot with Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey. Bring back. It's actually a 3-3 lineup, which is, I'm okay with that. But the 3 from the Bills being Amari Cooper captain, Josh Allen, and Curtis Samuel. Then you bring it back with Christian McCaffrey, Ricky Pearsall, and Jauan Jennings. I think that works. We could, rack up some PPR points for Jauan Jennings in particular. Maybe Ricky Pearsall spikes up higher target share in this one. McCaffrey can certainly rack up PPR points, or maybe Ricky Pearsall has the one receiving touchdown for the Niners, and McCaffrey and Jennings each have 8 receptions. So no Purdy necessary. Yeah, I think this could work for a large field GPP. Let me check in on chat, see if we have any questions. For fields less than 2,000, what max salary do you recommend? And I want to be clear, like somebody in my Discord actually pointed out, like Shady Advice, who is maybe like one of the best players in the world, allows for up to 50,000, like using the full salary cap. Some of his lineups will use the full salary cap. You just have to like choose which levers you want to pull to avoid some ownership. The one I choose to pull, because it's the easiest, and I use an opto for a lot of lineups, the easiest way is to leave salary on the table. So maybe in a field of 2,000, leave 500 on the table, max, something like that. But you could, if you're hand building, you can use the full salary. You just have to, in that case, make sure you have a couple players who are coming in like sub 20% owned, and like play the quarterback against the opposing defense. Like find other levers to pull so that you don't have to worry so much about duping with people, because you really don't want to be duping with people in a field of 2,000. So I would, if you're using an opto, I would probably try to leave at least like 500 on the table in a field that size. But if you're hand building, you could, like, if you like a lineup that uses the full salary and you're playing some contrarian players and maybe making a lineup that in some ways doesn't make complete sense, then I think you don't need to leave salary on the table necessarily in a field that size. All right, I'm going to do one more lineup here. Let's do a Josh Allen captain lineup. So a little bit tougher because he is expensive. I am going to go to Amari Cooper here again. You don't have to tell me on the Amari Cooper stuff, but he's one of my bigger stands, so I'm just going to lean into it, go right there. Now, because I have Josh Allen at captain, I'm going to lean into the passing game a bit. So Ty Johnson, I think, makes sense in a Josh Allen captain lineup as the passing game running back. Maybe one more too of the Bills pass catchers. Maybe I'll go Curtis Samuel. Jauan Jennings. I could go Jennings and McCaffrey again here, I assume. Or I'm close to it. Let's see. Yeah. That's right. So this could work. Full on. It's Allen with 3 of his pass catchers and Amari Cooper, Ty Johnson, and Curtis Samuel. Then you have just Jauan Jennings and Christian McCaffrey here. There are other ways to play it. So instead of McCaffrey and Jennings, maybe you do want to do a Brock Purdy lineup and then throw in, Deebo. You leave 600 700 on the table. Could go throw Kittle in there instead. You're leaving 1100 on the table. So I think this is one way to play. You could even throw, Jauan Jennings into this lineup with Purdy. If you think McCaffrey kind of banged up, maybe doesn't have the full workload, leave 2300 on the table. Here you go. Looks like this is the type of lineup that could work. I'm also tempted to do throw Khalil Shakir into this lineup. Again, I'm going to be a little bit underweight, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to find some lineups where Shakir makes sense. So maybe I'll throw Shakir in here instead of Curtis Samuel. And now, could still play Purdy with one of his cheap pass catchers. Maybe Purdy and Ricky Pearsall would probably work in this lineup. Yep, that would leave some salary on the table. Or you could go like McCaffrey, hope for those PPR points. I was going to say Bills defense, but now we don't have enough money for that. McCaffrey and that's right. The kickers are actually more expensive here. We could go Niners defense. So here's an example of a lever that I'm pulling that is going to make this lineup less likely to be duplicated. Because I'm playing Josh Allen captain with the 49ers defense, hoping for like a defensive touchdown where the Bills get the ball right back, but the Niners have picked up a lot of fantasy points in that case. So this is another way of pulling levers. So you got the correlation McCaffrey and Niners defense. And then you've got the Josh Allen with 3 pass catchers, probably his 2 top pass catchers, and then kind of the low owned running back. So I think this one kind of makes sense for a large field GPP. Could also, take, because we're pulling some other levers, you could take Johnson out of there, throw in a chalkier, use more of the salary with Curtis Samuel or Dawson Knox. So like for a smaller field contest, this would maybe make sense because we pulled a lever to make it more unique, but also just like this is going to project well with, and we also have Amari Cooper bringing down the ownership here a bit. So like this is something that could work for most fields, I think, just fine. All right, I should go get to making lineups, but I'll check in on you guys one more time. Yeah, I think I already answered. Probably not playing Garendo personally. Yeah, Shady. He's won a lot. He won. I was at the MLB Live final as a guest in August, and he won that for another milli. He wins all the time. All right, let's see. Cool. I think we are ready to go. Appreciate all of you for being here. Again, like the video. Please subscribe if you have not already done so. Trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. So would appreciate your support. I'll be back tomorrow for Monday Night Football stuff. I'll be with Adam in the morning or at noon Eastern time, maybe a little bit after noon Eastern time, and then I'll be back again prior to lock. So make sure you come back, check that out. But yeah, subscribe if you haven't done so. Like the video. Go join the Flannelverse Discord. Link is in the description of this video. Appreciate all of you very much. I will catch you tomorrow, and good luck. Let's win some money.